Hello and welcome to season 4 of The Dive. We have made it, my friends. I'm joined by Zale and Mark Z for our power rankings of the LCS 2020, as well as some meta changes.
It's kind of crazy. When I saw that this is our 4th season, I kind of had a little moment. I was like, wait, we've been doing it for that long?
Yeah, who's been counting this?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been around as long, so 4 sounds like young compared to like season 10 of League. We've been here. Not even half.
Well,
yeah.
also,
I'm just saying, like, when you guys like season 4, I was like, isn't this season 10? When he started saying it, I was like, oh, you mean of the Dive?
Yeah.
So Euphoria does seasons also, but they do a season every split. So they're catching up to us in number of seasons.
Well, then we're season 8.
Even though we started.
We do one episode seasons. We're at season 128 of.
We're sticking to the rules. 1 season per year, Azale.
Okay, we're honorable gamers over here.
How has your year started, by the way? I know you started playing a lot of the preseason. I'm actually enjoying it.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it quite a bit too. I've been playing, a lot of Phil and enjoying some roles more than others, I would say. I think overall it's been a lot of fun. I think it's more of a solo queue thing than a pro thing, but I do sometimes find it frustrating how powerful the souls feel. But I kind of get that it's more intended to really just close out the game, to end the game. But it is kind of that terrible feeling when your jungler's running it down and their jungler's, just like taking dragon after dragon. It's kind of like this impending doom where I always feel, especially if it's Ocean Soul, if they get Ocean Soul, I actually want to leave the game. Like, I just feel like it's totally doomed. So that's kind of my only like gripe with it, I get a bit, but there's always going to be things like that, whether it's the dragons or someone doing poorly or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel about the terrain changes? Because at first I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. It's going to like change the whole Summoner's Rift. And now when it happens, I don't really care about it that much.
The one I like the most is actually the Infernal.
Yeah. I like that. I
think that one's actually pretty fun. I think it opens up the map more.
Yeah.
That's the one I feel like actually impacts the way I play the game the most. For the most part, I mean, the Cloud one is definitely worthless. That one is completely worthless. It actually does nothing because both sides just have little speed up shrine. Like, I guess if you're roaming between mid and you go through and top and you go through your jungle, then it's a little bit faster. But like, really, it does nothing.
It doesn't change how you play.
Yeah, like the Infernal one, I think opens up more opportunities to flank and more avenues of attack, which is I kind of enjoy. Like, I've been playing a lot of Kled, and when I play Kled top and I get that, like, you can pick off the jungler in their jungle much more easily because there's not these walls kind of blocking around blue. There's less avenues for escape, and I think that's pretty fun.
And I think that one will also have some of the bigger changes in competitive play as well. Just like checking Baron is not like this. You come from 2 things and you get screwed by red buff's wall. Now you can just go right through, and I think that makes it like easier to contest Barons on an Infernal map in theory on red side.
At the same time, though, it's much more easy to engage on that team because people kind of use that red buff pit as a safe place where they can ward over, right, without just getting engaged on and killed. So it'll be interesting. I do think that the changes have more of an effect in pro play. I think Ocean probably has the biggest effect in pro play because talking to some players and just kind of looking at myself, you have to ward completely differently. You're relearning the vision game when it's the Ocean Rift, right? There's so many different new warding locations. The most annoying thing I think about that, and it's my only gripe for the Ocean Rift, is that there's the bush in the pit. So you actually need 2 pink wards to cover the dragon pit now. You actually need a pink ward in that bush and over in the corner to cover the whole area. Otherwise, someone could sneak a ward in the corner, which really tilts me. So I think things like that could take pro teams a while to kind of get the hang of. And I would not be surprised at all if wards kind of like escape people's notice and as a result could stall out games more. And
even though the bush is there, right? You still need more tools to cover all this area, right? So more sweepers, maybe that type of stuff.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff also isn't like huge meta defining. It's more just like another checkbox that you need to like go through in your mental inventory of getting ready on an ocean map means making sure you don't just drop a pink in the pit, that you actually have to scan it is probably the most efficient way to do it. But like that kind of stuff, I see what you're saying. It can be a little annoying to learn, but like once you learn it, it's kind of just on like this habitual thing that you do.
Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, even if you know that you should be checking all these brushes, there's just more areas that you have to check. There's more brush that you have to check, and sometimes the angles, around a corner, like a pink ward isn't covering where you think it's going to cover, and things like that. So I'm actually pretty excited for that stuff for Pro, because I do think it keeps it a bit more fresh when you have the different kind of looks on the Rift, and especially like it's always fun if you're playing a champion that you think is going to get an advantage from that type of Rift, right? Like I said, when I get Infernal and playing Kled, that's pretty hype. If you're playing, like I was playing a lot of Echo, and I actually really liked the Mountain Rift when I was playing Echo, because you could do things like you're running and you throw parallel convergence when you step behind one of those kind of like, pillars that has popped up, and they don't actually see the cast. So you can turn on fights, or you can cast your W from behind that and then look to ult back and things like this, right? Like there's more kind of tricky plays. So anytime I think you're playing a champion that can kind of take advantage of it, that's exciting, and hopefully we'll see some of that in Pro.
Yeah, I mean it's nice to keep it fresh, and you're playing on a little bit different of a court. The impact of changes for preseason, though, especially, I mean, I'm a jungler, so I've been 100% focused on all the changes to the jungle, and the dragon things to me were secondary. Besides, now I have to get them to stack.
How do you feel about the jungle? Because I've seen a lot of people.
So I went through phases.
Denial, anger,
acceptance, or whatever.
Of course, right off the bat, I knew that it was going to be a nerf. They said their goals are to nerf jungle because jungle was too impactful, too strong. It's a role that is really hard to balance. Now, and that's because it moves around the entire map. Literally every person on both teams gets affected by both junglers. So it's always going to be really difficult to balance. And even today, when we survey professional players, they're like, oh yeah, jungle, super high impact role. But every professional jungler is like, yes, and we are weaker than ever, basically reverting in power like closer and closer to the old supports, where you had to spend all your money on wards and stuff like that. But yes, it was a nerf. I accepted that it was going to be a nerf because, they were talking about that being their game plan. And I went through the phase of League of Legends where I had to only build Hearts of Gold.
Oracle's Elixir, Moby Boots, let's go!
I could not even build a real item. So I have been poor before as a jungler. And for me, it was like
cup noodles. Now you got the beef in there. You're not feeling so bad.
I was like, you know what? All right, we had some good times there the last couple of years. We were really powerful. I could go 1v1 these solo laners, and we're returning to some sort of old school style. And then, looking even further, I always like to judge each and every change in efficiency to jungling, because that's to me one of the biggest things that kind of got missed in their explanation of it. When they're saying, all right, we are nerfing the experience that you're going to get for these jungle camps, but we're increasing or we're reducing the respawn timer. So your jungle's going to respawn more. So theoretically, if you perma cleared from top to bottom, since they're respawning quicker, you'll actually get more experience. Doesn't that sound great, Mark?
Yeah.
The problem is that junglers always have so many things to do, and perma clearing is not a viable strategy,
especially in Pro.
Because
in solo queue, it's definitely a viable strategy for these Karthuses and Graves that keep getting my games who never come to a lane ever.
And I was gonna get to Karthus, because Karthus is one of the few champions that does actually get a lot of benefit from being able to farm very heavily. But even Karthus players, all high-rated Karthus players still go for ganks and objectives and all these types of things. Where you were looking at the efficiency of every individual action when you're a jungler. So they reduced the experience that you're getting for these camps. And even though they also reduced the respawn, the time it takes you to do it in the first place is still the same. So in your individual objective of your time spent here, it got worse. It's less efficient, except for Gromp, by the way, which is my secret gem
pro tip
to jungling.
So secret.
It actually is, because I feel like very few other junglers, and I'm already up in Diamond, have not been reading the actual changes. They're just like, oh, they nerf jungle, there's less, it's worse. you have to look at the efficiency of every single individual camp every time they change this because they're so wildly different.
They took it out of Krug, put it in a Gromp.
Gromp actually got better than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, tip for junglers at home or people trying to take advantage of everybody leaving the role. Farm your Krug, your double buffs, the Scuttle Crabs, which did not get reduced experience. They're still just as good. And gank extremely heavily. That is the secret to success right now. And I felt like merely by me reading up on the patch notes and looking at the individual efficiencies of each thing that you're going to do, I'm head and shoulders above most of the other junglers in solo queue right now that are just kind of scrambling around, flailing in the low experience,
rolling in the mud.
All those idiots. Yes, everybody's more. The junglers are more experienced.
Filth over there by the Raptors.
I think what you said is interesting though about like gank heavily. It's weird inverse relationship where like the more power you take out of the jungle camps, the more impactful I think you make junglers feel to laners and stuff because it makes it better to go for ganks and things like that. And so I think when you do that, the more you nerf jungle, you're actually making it more annoying for laners because it's like, well, this guy is probably going to be spending his time better if he's actually in my lane or trying to influence one of our 3 lanes pretty consistently. Whereas when the jungles were more farm heavy and more carry oriented, when Graves could actually pop off and stuff like that, in like 1v9, maybe a little bit too hard, but at least like he was spending more time getting his own stuff.
The counterpoint to that is that that's only true like right at the beginning. There's definitely a fall off, right? Because there's literally there's no catch up mechanic anymore, and there's just less experience that you can get from those camps. So I was very serious before where I was like, the last couple of seasons, I feel great going to solo, take 1v1 fights with a top laner.
Challenging Smite was broken.
Exactly. I had Challenging Smite, and I've been firing away. Now, like, you actually will be further down in levels. It has added more volatility to it. So if my ganks are successful, you can still have junglers popping off and, carrying games like that, right? But if you are unsuccessful, and this was another goal that they stated, like they wanted to bring back punishment in the jungle. That's why they removed the catch-up experience and what people were crying for.
That was the most fun stuff I ever had when I jungled was like you go red to red and you kill the guy at his red and you take his red and you're level 3 and he's like level 2 and you take a couple more camps, you're level 4, he's level 2, you kill him again in his jungle and it's like this guy's dead. He's out of the game. Yeah. That was really fun to just take people out of the game. Like you crush them. I feel like it's been a while since you could crush someone in jungle.
Yeah, because catch-up experience would just slingshot them back into the game. So I actually really do like that change. I've played quite a bit of jungle in preseason as well, and I mean, it's obviously going to feel really bad if you're getting constantly invaded and you're on the bad end of it, especially if your soul laners are getting slammed and you're getting multiple man invades and you don't feel like you can do anything individually.
Welcome to season 2.
But the truth is, I think it's more rewarding, and in general, you can see more of a difference between the junglers. Whereas before, it often felt like even if you got this big lead, the person just had to farm their camps and they would catch right back up. If you die one time, it's like they're back in the game. Now I see games where people are 3-4 levels ahead at a time, and they're able to like maintain these enormous leads if they're really snowballing.
So, well, yes, on one hand, I agree with you, and guilty pleasure. I like it when I'm sustaining a 3 to 4 level lead above the enemy jungler, and their team is flaming them in all chat and talking about jungle difference, and you're sitting there on your team, and everybody's like, "Yeah, I agree, we killed him, dude." That you should probably enjoy that, but I really do enjoy that. What it also does is push everyone towards very similar champion pool.
Yeah.
So at the cost of losing some of the diversity where you can't really play slower junglers, the tanks
really
have dropped off quite a lot. It's put a lot of emphasis on Elise, Rek'Sai, style champions, like I said, that are very good at going for those earlier game ganks, because you can get to level 3 at the exact same time, even faster if you're just doing, one of the blue side clears compared to an old blue side clear. But getting to level 3 and like, it's almost like this is your peak as a jungler, and you're like, all right, time to get some work done now. And you go out and you get successful ganks with these super good early ganking champions. It leaves very little room for the other styles of jungle. And I feel like that's one of the biggest differences in the changes for this season. A lot of the nerfs heavily targeted some champions and not others for the jungle. So people are still getting used to those changes. And we've actually seen a huge drop off in people that select jungle as their primary role. I feel like because there were so many junglers that were like, all right, this is the type of jungler I am. I am a tank, or I am a, more farm style or jungler.
The herbivores have gone extinct.
Jad is an example of this.
No more Phoenix
he's
Udyr.
He's switching to bottom lane
double
support
bot lane
with his buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Double support at him bot lane.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see where it goes, though, because those are the type of champions that are super exciting for pro play.
Yeah.
So I think it will be fun to watch. I'm curious to see what they feel like moving forward as far as getting jungle diversity up, or where it actually lands.
Yeah.
Because Karthus and Yi have good win rates as far as the farm oriented ones. Yi is a lot of boosters and Taric mid funnel.
Yeah, it's
stuff.
a weird one.
So that one's a little bit weird.
Taric's like
but
mid 60s in win rate now in mid and maybe even top 2. It's really high in top as well. It's like number 1 win rate from both those lanes because everyone's doing the boosting strat again. But to pull it into pro a little bit, I'm going to be pretty interested to see whether people, like as far as junglers go and teams in general, are they going to be heavily focused on dragons and trying to actually stack towards soul, or are they going to be going up more towards the Rift Herald? Because there's kind of 2 different schools of thought that I've been, seeing myself in gains and also hearing about from scrims and talking to pros. It's kind of school 1 is stack dragons often early and rush towards the soul. If you get the soul, you win, right? But the other side of it is, if the other team during that time, while you take the first 2 dragons, is taking Rift and snowballing top and getting a big advantage, they're in then perhaps a better position to actually contest at that 3rd dragon. And because the individual dragon buffs are much less powerful than they were last season, if you never actually get to the soul and you're committing all your early game time on controlling the dragons, then it can really be pretty punishing, right? Because you're looking at an early game Infernal that's 5% AD AP, whereas previously it was 12%. You really do need to get the soul if you're going to go for that strategy.
Especially if you are just getting individual early Mountain Drakes, which the Mountain Drake buff is not very strong for a lot of the builds that people are going for right now. Not a lot of people are going for
Not a lot of people playing tanks.
And so, bonus, percentage resistances isn't going to go a super long way.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I come back to time efficiency of your single objective that you're going for. Actually, Rift Herald takes a very long time, and so it's still kind of a low priority for me. I would rather spend my time, like actually with my top laner, forcing the guy off the tower to miss waves so that they're missing solo lane experience, which is really big, and getting plates and stuff like that, and still getting some tower damage. But I think that's what it always comes back down to. You have to value, like, how long is it actually taking you to take this objective? And for the new season, what is that actually going to give you? I know that in the patch notes for the beta or the public test realm, they are like tinkering around with ways to buff Rift Herald and like strengthen the top side of the map, because so much of it has also been around, oh, well, I guess we're not ganking for top laners for another season because Dragon Souls are so big.
I think it'll, especially in pro play, also matter a lot just how the meta goes. Because initially, in the early weeks of the LCS, the game time is always longer. It's people figure out the meta, figure out how they work as a team, and then it drops off over the course of the season, gets faster and faster. If you start the season and it's 35-minute game times on average, which is relatively long if people don't know, that's a fairly long average game time. Dragon Soul's probably way more important than Rift Herald.
Yeah.
But if, this early ganking style is really important and lanes are snowbally, and Rift Herald, even if it's not super efficient to go for, if there's nothing else to go on the map and it helps you break mid turret, which is really important in pro play or whatever, maybe it ends up being where Rift Herald is more important than is being valued in solo queue. So I have no idea in the 2 schools of thought.
I think we're going to get the clutch gaming 10-minute Rift Herald.
I think we're going to get...
That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because I like the first one while plates are still up, because you can definitely cash in quicker. And just side note, their change where it's only 1 second channel now, by the way.
That's really nice.
So it feels so much better.
You don't walking in and...
I've actually never seen one get interrupted since they changed that.
It feels so much better. Anyways, did like that change, but I think that the beginning of this season is going to start out with fairly quick game times if the high ELO for solo queue is an indication. And just from talking to people for scrims in North America and Europe, both, people are generally on the train of, yes, it's quicker pace right now. And people are also picking a lot of lane bullies because of that. And because of the team aspect of being able to actually get a jungler behind and then them not having the fallback pattern. Like if you can take someone out of the game, it is much easier now to keep them down. So things like solo lane Lucian, solo lane Rumbles, those sorts of things, early power is going to go a long way, I think, for the start of the meta.
Yeah, should be interesting. All right, so there's a
new game.
Yeah, we got a new game, and we're gonna call this game Report and Honor. So what we're gonna do each week, you can report someone who's messing up, someone who's been trolling, maybe a change you don't like, a team who hasn't been doing well, and also we're gonna hand out our honor for the week for the player or team or whatever that we're really feeling has been doing well. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'll start us off.
Let's start negative with reports, right?
Report?
Yeah. Report.
Okay. Let's get into the flame game.
You could give us your report and honor, and then we can go on.
Okay, yeah, we'll do both.
Yeah.
I don't actually have my honor, but my report came pretty quickly.
Wait,
I just introduced
so you're
them to
reporting
this
someone
game.
and then you're just leaving the lobby.
Yeah,
You're not honoring.
sing it off.
I'm gonna honor after we give reports.
Okay.
Off-season report here.
Okay.
And I know Zabatine gave his reasoning, and a lot goes on behind the scenes. You have to take into account for whenever you're constructing a roster. You know, there's payment that you have to give. There's team infrastructure. You know, relationships, all that sort of stuff. But the pickup of Ica for mid lane. To me was reportable. He's using an import slot to bring back this guy who played in one of the first couple of seasons of the EU LCS before it was called LEC. Didn't do that well, so went down to the French league and was playing in the French league for a very long time and doing pretty well in the French league. But then he positioned it when he was defending the choice of, like, everyone's like, why are you bringing in Ica? He's like, oh, why are you getting mad at me for like giving a young talent, new player, a new chance? And I was like, is that really a new chance if he's been playing for that long?
It's been since 2014, I think, was like the first thing on his Leaguepedia page.
And yeah, so anyways, I think that's going to be my report, even though I know he has deep connections with the French league. So I'm sure he's got a relationship with the person, really has seen something. If it doesn't pan out, that's going to be some flame.
All right. I got my report. It's also another roster move. Keith support. Come on, Golden Guardians. Are you kidding me?
Roll
That
spot,
is
baby.
reportable. Report. This, to be clear, I'm not blaming Keith whatsoever. If someone's going to offer me an LCS spot, like, oh yeah, I could play it. You know, someone comes up to me like, do you think you can play mid lane else? Oh, yeah, I can play mid. Can you play jungle? Oh, of course. Yeah, sure I can. I could do that. It's not his fault. But the fact that, you know, we're actually getting a role swapped AD over to support, I think makes so little sense here. You know, given the history of Keith in the LCS and given that there's actually, you know, there's gotta be other supports here. And it just felt like they went too all in on kind of getting Vulcan. That was my impression from the content that they put out. That didn't work. And it was kind of like, well, shit, what do we do now? And I just don't get it, man. I'd rather see, you know, academy support pulled up, you know, try to go after one of those guys who has more experience in the role, or even who he's at least already swapped for a while and has more experience. That even makes more sense to me.
I super enjoyed that video, though, by the way.
No.
I thought it was so funny because it also puts a timestamp on when he started practicing. Because the argument could be, all right, well, you know, Keith thought for a while, you know, he's been playing ADK for a while, never got, you know, bumped up for a full time. So he's putting a lot of time into this support role. No, it was like after the offseason when they found out that they couldn't get Vulcan, and they're like, well, we want someone who can play aggressive. I decided, Keith, this is your shot.
Yeah, I know. That's why I love that video for like a behind the scenes look at GMing and running and like what really goes on in the off season. Cool. and then like proceeds to show them lose the offseason. That's why it felt so bad. It was like, come look at what's going on behind the scenes. Everything's on fire. So,
Yeah, it felt weird because they were like, okay, so it's our explanation of why Keith is substituting, and they were like, we tried to get Vulcan, we could not. Anyone else?
yeah, and it's like it was just like Keith can use his hands. We'll use Keith. We just need a support who can use. That's what they said. Like we want a support who is good with their hands.
They need someone mechanically.
He repeated multiple times that he wanted someone to play aggressively in lane
and be mechanically good.
Yeah. So
that thought process I get, but I just think we have seen how difficult that role actually can be. As far as it's not just the laning phase. There's so much more to it, right? Those guys are often very responsible for tracking vision and setting up plays in the early game, and preparing Dragon and blah blah blah. It's a pretty complicated role.
All right, small last little tidbit on the sales report. I have been checking in with Keith every time I see him out. There's been multiple times now. And the last one was this last weekend. And he does feel a lot better about it now than the previous check-in. So
I saw
he's still on the up and ups here as far as the learning curve goes. He feels pretty confident now.
A couple weeks ago, I did some sleuthing. I found his Korean account, and he was in Grandmaster Korea as support only. He had a really good thresh win rate. So, again, good to him. He's working at it. We'll see if it works out. Don't think it will.
Vulcan was challenger, by the way, at the same time in the same solo queue league.
Yeah. Well, they did want it. Yeah. Here's your report.
So my report is I'm reporting the U.S. Department of State for not handing out visas fast enough. Yeah. Specifically for Broxah, but I heard other teams were having problems too. I just don't know if they've been quite as public about it. So we'll see in a couple days exactly how good everyone is going to be on week 1, or if there's going to be a lot of academy players getting stage time.
So you're reporting them, but some of the other teams might be giving their honor to them. They're like, oh, this is great.
For tactical Intic Team Liquid, you want to honor no. As a fan, I'm reporting, okay?
The integrity of the league.
Yeah, Department of State, you're on notice.
Oh, okay. All right. Do you have an honor too?
Yeah, so for my honor, I'm honoring Trey Stafford, the producer of The Dive.
Oh, okay.
For bringing me on full time. I think
that was actually us who we were like, yo, can you reach out to Mark and ask if he wants to do it full time? So really, he's honoring us. So,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll change it to the other co-host of The Dive, picking me to be the third co-host of The Dive. Okay, there we go.
All right. Well,
that's official, right?
Yeah.
Am I announcing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're on The Dive. Congratulations.
Forever.
I mean, we can change our mind at any time, though, right?
Yeah.
No. It's forever. I'm pretty sure.
You're like, this is in blood. It's never allowed to change. All right. My honor is actually going to be to EG. I think that I've enjoyed how they have actually come onto the scene. Whether or not it's going to work out, I enjoyed that they came on with a bit of a splash with kind of an angle as far as like we're going to be the bad boys. I don't know if it's really going to line up with the players' personalities and whatnot. But I like that they're actually taking some swings at some of these orgs and that they were kind of swinging for the fences as far as some of their acquisitions. Right? They did get Svenskeren, who was the MVP. They were looking for Chovy. That didn't work out, but they were clearly trying to make some big moves. I don't know whether or not this roster is actually going to be good, and we'll get into that, right after this. But I like that a new team came in and immediately kind of made a splash, and it feels a little bit reminiscent of when 100 Thieves were coming in, and it feels like this is a team that could make a bit of a splash in the scene.
Okay. Your report gave me inspiration for my honors. I'm gonna honor the players that are filling in different roles. It's not just Keith, but also like Poe Belter, who probably is gonna come in as the juggler there. Yeah. And because you're gonna get flamed. Everyone will say, "Oh, it's okay. People will be easy on you." They know that you're playing a different role. That's never true. No. It's like in solo queue, you get in a champ select. You're like, "Oh, I'm autofill. I'll switch. Okay, I'll let you have your main role." As soon as you get into the game, though, the person person I gave jungle to that was AD carry before is now flaming me for being a bad AD carry, and I'm like, I can't get a jungle. That's my.
At the same time,
you get counterpicked.
Poe Belter will have a good attitude about it, I imagine. If they're struggling.
And he's been grinding, so that's
he's been playing a lot, but I can't imagine that team getting bent out of shape, at least internally, So even if the fans are raging, I expect everyone to just laugh it off because they're like, we'll be the best team in the end. So who really cares? Mm-hmm. And plus, they're already making jokes about
What
it.
about the Keith Golden Guardians? I don't think they have that.
Yeah, that's a
luxury.
little less of a laugh.
They need those W's.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys let us know what your reports and honors were for the week. We're going to keep doing this as long as you guys are enjoying it. LCS Spring Split.
That's what the people came
started
here for.
up. It is just around the corner. We're going to be starting this Saturday. So should we just start it from the top?
Get it. Let's do our aggregate list.
Okay. So
and then as we discuss the teams, we can give our individual plus minuses. So what we did as usual, which we do most years, we all made our own individual lists. Then we came together, averaged them out, just to have this one for the order that we go by for the dive.
all right, you want me to read out the whole aggregate? All right, number 1, we have TL. Then we got C9 at number 2, TSM number 3, CLG is number 4, EG at 5, Dignitas 6, 100 Thieves 7, FlyQuest 8, Immortals 9, and Golden Guardians at 10th is the aggregate list. There was some variance, especially, 4, 5, 6. People were kind of moving things around, and also at the bottom of the table.
Yeah. And for a lot of these, there was a lot of wiggle room in my decision making for where I wanted to place them, because we're trying to project how they will finish spring. How they're going to do coming out of the gate is one thing, and I've talked to a lot of players for scrims and getting info for what people feel like right now, and looking at the rosters is something right now. But projecting all the way to spring, there's a lot of variance here. That being said,
There's not much at the top.
let's start at the top.
Everyone put Team Liquid number 1. Boring. Everyone knows they're going to be the best team, I think. At least on paper. You can't make a...
They're the odds-on favorite.
Right. There's no... You can say, I think this will be the year that they finally... Or like the split they finally fail, but you're not basing that off anything other than like at some point everything ends. That's basically the argument you're making, which is not something that great to debate. You're like, okay, well, maybe you're right.
And for the record, I would say that overall, the level of the LCS as a league as a whole is higher.
Yeah.
I think that it got a little bit squished as far as the bottom definitely came up. Like you're talking about, a lot of these new teams coming in really made pushes to try and construct the best possible roster. And there was a lot of shift. This was one of our off seasons with one of the most number of changes in starting rosters. As far as TL though, since everyone, like you're talking about, knows already the reasoning of the 4 times champion, we can talk about the small piece that they did change, jungle. And assuming that Broxa eventually gets over here,
He never makes it. Stuck.
the idea kind of where they talked about with the change for the jungle is to give, more priority for mid jungle synergy is a big deal, that they wanted to work on, and especially, jungling for the early game with the changes we just talked about for this season, is probably going to, at least for the beginning of the season, highlight a lot of early good ganking junglers. Broxa plays the Elise, Lee Sin, Rek'Sai, these sorts of things. And when he was on Fnatic in Europe, we talked about this at Worlds all the time. Fnatic's early game stats were insane, in large part due to Broxa. So that does seem like an upgrade to our 4 times champion. And that's one of the reasons why it's hard to knock them down the list. If they fail, though, like, where do you guys see them failing?
I mean, just to add on to the Broxa thing a little bit, I mean, Fnatic had even better early game stats than G2, right? And Broxa
In
did
Golden.
yeah, exactly. And did really get a lot of that credit. I think if they were to fail, it would be one of those situations where, we saw TSM making their move where they replaced Doublelift and kind of everything on paper makes sense, bringing in Sven and Mithy, who are incredibly talented from Europe, and this is going to upgrade our communication. If that player just does not click with the team, if Broxa does not work with these solo lanes, and all of a sudden your early game sucks and your late game, consistency is gone from Mithy, I don't think that'll happen, but it's got to be kind of that sort of direction. Or the other thing is, honestly, it can be really hard to stay motivated when you're at the top. Right? Motivation, I think, is fleeting. Discipline is the thing you have to rely on. And if you're not staying incredibly disciplined and still outworking all these other teams, someone can catch up. Someone could pass you, right? Like we talk about TL being clear number 1, and I think that's Completely reasonable to say. But you also have to look at last year versus the year before, right? Last year was 3-2, 3-2 in both the finals, if I'm recalling correctly.
Yep.
The year before that, they 3-0'd 100 Thieves, and then what was it, 3-1 against C9 or 3-0? 3-0. So 6-0 versus a 6-4, right? Like, and also they had to reverse sweep TSM. So as dominant as this team is, and as good as this team is, they were very close to losing in both of those splits, and I do think it could happen if they don't stay motivated, if they are not grinding, right? Doublelift just has won so many times in NA. Is he going to be working as hard? I don't know, right? And if he does, I think they'll win again. But if they don't, you can get past.
I think that's the bigger concern for me. Like, if Broxa comes in and he doesn't work quite as well as Smithy, I still think the players, assuming they're motivated and working really hard, are good enough to get over that kind of hurdle. Even if they do end up being a weaker team as a whole, they still would be the strongest team on paper. The questions about motivation and can they stay on top after winning nonstop for 2 years domestically is the bigger concern. I think the comparisons between 2018 and 2019 in terms of like their competition's a little difficult, because after franchising, everyone's teams have blown up. It was like 3 players were on the same teams, and I think a lot of those teams were not great. I didn't think it was a great year. Like 100 Thieves was our best team in spring, our second best team. Team Liquid was struggling themselves to find an identity, and I think in 2019, TSM and C9 were actually a lot better.
Yeah.
And this kind of comes down to how good is the competition around them this year. Is it more like 2018 level or is it 2019 level? Because it's another year, like we were saying, with a lot of turnover. And sometimes rosters just aren't that good, or they start okay and they fall apart, or whatever happens. So I'm looking at like C9 this year, and I have a hard time being more excited about it than I was last year. I think Blabber could work out, but what if he's not quite as good? And what if Sven doesn't bounce back and he continues on his kind of what seems like a downward trajectory since coming over? And, what if Zeyzal, the criticisms people had against him, were totally justified? I think that's my concern. Whereas if one of these teams, even if Team Liquid isn't super motivated, can they still beat these other teams if they don't pan out with all the changes that happen? I think even that's a potential.
So I'm kind of more on the other side, to be honest, as far as I actually think it is more like the 2019 year than the 2018. And maybe I'm looking at it a little bit more glass half full, but I think that, for me, and this kind of leads into this next grouping of teams, I see C9, TSM, and even CLG as teams with their upper limit being competing with and potentially beating TL. Right? If they play as well as they can, if they really work out, and when I'm looking glass half full at C9, this is who most people point to as the best top laner in the league still, Licorice, because he's very skilled both at carries and tanks, right? Impact may be the better weak side player.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe in summer, people would start to like disagree, and I'm like, totally. I would put for summer especially Impact.
Impact played better in summer, I agree. But in the pros I've talked to, this is still the guy that they point to mostly. Blabber we have seen can be very explosive if he can work well with Niski had a great summer as well. People were putting him at number 1, number 2 in a lot of these rankings. And this Sven Vulcan bot lane, I think could really work out. I think Vulcan was quite impressive last year, and paired with a better AD now, these are guys who bootcamped really well in Korea. If you have a more dominant laning phase, I think Sneaky and Zeyzal were great, but laning was not their real strength, right? And if this is a lane that can kind of go even or match up better against TL, then C9 all of a sudden, I think you can start to see where there would be some ways in. Of course, this is kind of looking at it glass half full, but I do think that the likes of C9, TSM, and CLG have opportunities to really, I think, compete.
Yeah, I mean, we all have C9 as our number 2 team, and I think the reasons are obvious. I think whatever happened at Worlds with Niski, like he wasn't playing with Sven, who he played with the whole time. Sven, whatever happened, was benched, or they thought Blabber. Yeah, Niski was terrible, but I don't think I would look to that as to continue. I think we'll see more like domestic Niski. Licorice is still good. Blabber's really explosive, like you're saying. Vulcan's also a really active player. And always looking for opportunities to make fights happen. So I see C9 becoming this really, really aggressive early game team, which will kind of be the identity that they already had a little bit last year, just even indexing into it a little bit more, hopefully with Vulcan getting a lot of hype. Doublelift praised him a lot in the offseason, so that seems like a really good pickup, assuming Sven does work out.
It was actually really funny during the offseason when I was trying to get info from everybody, and I had, I think 4 in a row different GMs in my conversations with them were like, oh yeah, like thinking they're really smart and sneaky, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna get Vulcan, and I'm like,
Everyone's saying that.
That's not like a secret. He's good. Everyone knows that he's good. That's not a crazy new pickup or whatever.
Yeah.
But maybe it's because like he doesn't have like this huge fan base. Maybe it's because he never was on like a huge banner team.
Yeah.
And now is gonna be a chance for him. So I think this is gonna be a big year where maybe that fandom does explode. But yeah, he was definitely a very strong pickup for them. I am going to be so curious about the comms for Cloud9 now, because Sneaky being off the team, that is one of the big things that all of those players all talked about.
Yeah.
You know, him keeping the mentality good, especially for long games or comeback games, which, by the way, Cloud9 had a tremendous amount of comeback games where they were down in gold and, you know, they got these big flanks. It would a lot of the times be Licorice doing the flank. But, you know, they also talk about Sneaky keeping the comms, trying to get the shot calling going in the right direction. So they are changing up a couple of key positions. I feel like that might have switches around there. So I'll definitely be interested to see how the team play comes through, because that was one of their big strengths.
Zazel too, right? You know, I kind of criticize his laning a little bit, and a lot of pros will tell you he's one of the weaker laning supports, but he was fantastic in team fights. His comms are really good. He's, you know, very positive force in the comms of the team, and also really, really good at tracking cooldowns and finding engages and knowing when to fight and these sorts of things. And also, the third guy they're missing, Sven Skaren, was the MVP for a reason. Often because he was finding, it really stuck with me. I remember one day doing analyst desk with Golden Blue.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like this. They're basically just like amazed at him finding these engages that he thinks just like shouldn't be able to happen, right? You know, I think it was a place Olive and Golden Glue, right?
Yeah, it was the TSM versus C9 game, so we had the two Academy guys on watching the game with us, and both of them were just like, God, I want to play with a guy like that.
It's like, oh, this game's so over. There's no way they can come back. And then Sven finds some incredible engage, like, oh, you could do that. Like, you know, it was just like watching these pros be so in awe of another pro, because he was just doing things that were shocking them, right?
Two mid laners, though.
Yeah, exactly. So they certainly have lost quite a lot, you know, when you're looking at those pieces, and I think, you know, fans are going to be really sad that Sneaky's not in the league. I'm really sad that Sneaky's not in the league. It's too bad that he didn't end up with a team. You know, I have kind of heard rumors basically that, you know, there was offers, but it didn't really match up with what he was hoping to get and things like this. It just didn't really come together. So it's not that no one wanted him. It's just that it didn't really come together with either a roster or whatever it was that he was looking for. I'm hopeful that we'll get him back, but I still think that C9 fans can have some confidence in the fact that, you know, Reaper and Jack have been able to consistently create good teams, right? And these teams have worked. And I think that when you look at a lot of these individual pieces that are going to be on C9, it seems to fit the kind of mold of League of Legends that they want to play.
Yeah, I think in general, C9 has a lot of goodwill built up with the community, where people will see a roster move that doesn't seem like a clear upgrade and say, it'll probably work out, because it's always kind of worked out for them.
I feel like they got a lot of flame this last
they got a lot
times,
of
though. The sneaky benching and Jensen Bensing, they were getting blasted. And this year, I think they're getting blasted too.
I think they often get, maybe less so by like the hardcore fans who are like, I like this player, and you're not giving this player what I think he deserves or something. But from the more analytical perspective of like, Reaper has always managed to make the team function well by the end of the year. And I still believe that will happen again. And I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like, I have a lot of faith and goodwill built up from watching Reaper do it with so many different iterations of the C9 roster. Yes, it is the first time without Sneaky, but literally every other piece has moved around and they've stayed on top. So I expect they can do it with Sneaky as well.
Yeah. I mean, and they also have strong pieces. This is still a strong roster. That's why they're still at number 2 here. For me, one of the ones where I was considering wiggling around and moving up was actually TSM, which is at our number 3 right now.
We're going to wiggle up or down?
They were going to wiggle both ways.
Wiggle both ways?
You wiggle both ways, it ends up in the middle again.
Exactly. That's why it's like, and it stayed there. Because, okay, so of course, everyone's going to focus on Dardoch, right? Because nobody knows what to expect when he joins a new team, because he has joined so many new teams and has had big successes in the early stages with a lot of those teams, by the way. So there's a reason why he keeps getting picked up, even though there's also a reason why the team keeps disbanding, basically. I I know one of the few believers that I'm just like, I am going to keep saying that I think it can work. Until actually, I'm just always going to keep saying that it can work until maybe I get the chance to be on the team and inside and coaching and actually experience it. Because I really do think that there are good pieces on TSM that can contribute to a different Dardoch. A more healthy team, I guess, atmosphere. Bjergsen is an extreme veteran, and he has even said himself he feels like he's in a good place to lead now because he has grown over the years so much, and he's so well respected. So if Bjergsen tells you something, they'll listen, at least maybe the first couple of times till it doesn't work, I guess. Plus, Peter Zhang, which not a lot of people are talking about the coaching changes for TSM. But every player that I've talked to that has been on a team with him absolutely loves him. He does a very good job of getting player trust, and catering to specific players. So that's why I'm betting on Pro Dardoch is probably going to work. Mm-hmm. And then I also think the other changes were good. Bringing in Kabe, and bringing back Bifrost is I think an upgrade for me to the bottom lane.
Like Kobe's like, it'll work out eventually. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. It depends how the clock breaks. Because maybe the arms broke off of the clock and it's no longer pointing at anything.
Maybe it's digital. It's just off.
And it just has those little bars going across.
I didn't say one word about
power
clocks.
anymore.
I was just saying you're like, I'll always believe in Dardoch and eventually it'll be right.
So here, I know that both of you guys do not believe, but you still put TSM third.
So
riddle me that.
Well, so I was just more making fun of you than giving my honest opinion.
I actually think that there's good odds for him to perform pretty well. Me not believing in Dardoch doesn't mean I think that he's really bad or anything like that. You know, as far as that goes, I actually have always felt like he's a strong player. It's been attitude issues that have plagued him for a really long time. I think if he can get the mental side of the game under control, then I think he's going to be consistently a top, half jungler in the league, and he's going to be starting on LCS teams for many years to come. He is clearly talented. Anyone who watches him play when he's playing at his best can see that. But the downside that you get with him is there are games where it just feels like he gives up, right? And I've, seen him play those types of games where it doesn't feel like he's trying anymore. It doesn't feel like he's mentally in it, right? And that is the side that people are always worried about. As far as why I put them third, I do think when I'm looking at this roster, I did a lot of thinking about this TSM roster and kind of comparing to what they had before. I feel like Bifrost over the last year or two has been playing better than Smoothie. I think that is an upgrade. I think Kabe is a similar player to Sven, playing probably at or above his level, right? I think, arguably this should be a better bot lane. I think that the ADs, I think Sven was really good, by the way. So I'm not saying like, ooh, at that level means he's bad. I think he's really good. So I think bot lane is as good or better. And Dardoch, I think, Grig, as great as he has been in solo queue, never made it really happen on stage for me. I was never really impressed with Grig. And Dardoch, I think, has always been a bit better than the Cadian as well. I think that he should be a better player than either of the junglers that TSM were bouncing back and forth between. So I think TSM should be, a team that's high up in the standings. Could the wheels fall off? Sure, maybe. But my doubts and why I didn't put them even higher than that is because I think that the baseline for this team should be top 3. I think that's like, that's if you get below top 3, I think that's a failure for this team. They should be really good, but Broken Blade wasn't as good in summer. I'm not completely, 100% sure how well Dardoch's going to play, but if Dardoch works really well with Bjergsen and Broken Blade plays like he did in spring, I think this team could win the championship, right? Like, I think they're that good.
I think that's why as well for me, as much as we were joking about Dardoch, when you watch him be good, like on early Echo Fox and on early CLG, even on early CLG, they were the number 1 team. He didn't look great, but then also Liquid, his first split, like undeniably he can take over games and absolutely run things over. And when you look at their spring split and what they did well and how they were winning games, it was a very fat topside camp playing around Broken Blade's carry champions, snowballing up there, bot side playing more the weak side, and then Bjergsen kind of assisting that or sometimes playing through him as well. That's what this roster should do great on paper when I look at like what their play style is going to be. I think that's a similar thing. Bifrost has always had great roam, so he can get involved with Dardoch as well, assuming that they are able to work well together. So like, Azale's saying, that's a team that probably, if all the wheels are turning, be first place. For me, I don't think all the wheels are going to turn over the course of the season, because that's where these problems have arisen in the past. And I'm not ready to believe yet, because we've heard it so many times. Like, every team Dardoch joins puts out a PR thing with him. This time's different, and then it's never different. And to be fair, the team like Echo Fox had horrible things going on. That was just a disaster. And then he never really got the chance on Optic last year to get above Meteos. Maybe it is different because it has been a longer break since we've seen him on a team, and it didn't sound like there were I didn't hear any horror stories from Optic, really. So maybe it really is, going to be different this time. I'll give him a little bit more faith than I had when it was directly team to team to team. But I still need to see it, Yeah,
it's not what you can say, it's what you can do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that everyone will be bought in when a year has gone by and you haven't even heard a whisper, right? And when that happens, I think this guy is going to have an incredible career ahead of him. And I hope that, for him and for TSM, that they can do that, because he is really, really talented. And I want to see more really good, really exciting players in the league. And he is that at his best. Like, he is an explosive carry jungler. I think that this meta should suit him incredibly well. When I think about, all his best games, it was on those types of early aggressive champions where he can take over a game. And I think that he should shine with this roster. You're getting paired up against, the most successful mid laner in NA history, right? This guy who has been around forever. TSM, I think, is very hungry for success. And I think, they have crafted a roster that can challenge for championships. So I think their fans should be excited. And I just hope that they can play to that potential, because we've heard this from Double a bunch of times. But I think most serious fans of the league want this too. You want there to be a high level of competition. You want TL to be losing and getting challenged, so that these teams are pushing each other and getting better and better and better.
Yeah, I mean, just that Miami game. I think everyone remembers when he was on Olaf and just basically put on the most disgusting jungle stomp of all time on Olaf, where he murdered Lyra over and over and over again. It was one of the most dominant single games from a jungle position I've ever seen. I was like, I want this all the time. It's just, we haven't seen it yet. But like, if that happens where he's at that level for the majority of a season, especially in playoffs, like, this team will be so good.
All right. Counter Logic Gaming, the team on the other end of the support trade.
Yep.
CLG and TSM once again trading around some resources, and Smoothie and Biofrost exchange places. Now, we went to CLG's facility and talked to several of the managers as well as the coach. And this was the first thing, before we even asked any questions, this was the first thing that out of their mouths that they started talking about. And they're like, well, I'm sure you guys are interested about that support trade. And I know some people say we lost the trade, give me Biofrost back, but we feel like we won it. And their explanation was around the communication, where you look at TSM, their comms look pretty full already, if you look at all the other players on that team. And so they want a quieter person, quieter support. Smoothie has always been a very vocal, for some teams even too vocal in their comms. But CLG, that's exactly what they needed, because Ruin and Crown, both fairly quiet. Wiggly, they talked about doing early game shot calling. But if you know him in person as well, he's also one of the more reserved people. So overall, it was going to be a fairly reserved and low on the communication as far as in game. So adding Smoothie is one of the things that they're actually most excited about, which was really interesting.
That sounds nice. I think I had them fifth. You had them fourth, and
you had them fifth.
I had them fourth. Yeah.
So I guess as the naysayer, I will say
a whole one spot down.
Nay.
Nay.
I think when I look at how this team won last year, they're going to have to come up with a new identity. I don't think it carries over. Sometimes things carry over, like we're saying with TSM. Oh, I can see that play style working with these changes. I don't see the slow pace, grind people out play style working when you get rid of Biofrost, put Smoothie in, and when you get rid of PoE and put Crown in. I don't see it working the same way. And I'm not sure what the new style is. We all think Crown's one of the most talented mid laners in the league.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited.
I think Crown's incredible, but when I watch the Optic games, there are a number of times where he died a ton not being on the same page with his team. And I don't know why that would be any different here with Wiggly. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but it's not like I'm going to instantly buy in. PoE, for all of his faults, which I think, you can look at his aggressiveness, his involvement in the early game, his champ pool being a little weird, whatever, he at least fit with what they were doing. I don't know if they're going to try and play around Crown more, how all that's going to work. I was always a little bit pessimistic on Rune compared to other people. I think he was fine. I just didn't think he was top 3 material. We'll see if he really is and can prove that this split. I think that'll be a huge point if he is actually, a top 3 mid laner, or excuse me, top laner in the league. And then they played a lot around their bot lane. Can they do that without Biofrost, who I think was a better mechanical laner than Smoothie is, beyond any of this communication stuff? I think this opened up enough question marks for me that I wasn't ready to take their 4th place finish in summer from last year and transfer it over. I think other teams made more upgrades and it'll push them down a little bit. I don't think they're going to explode though or anything.
Yeah, see, I guess the way I look at it is the way that they played was more like a product of them having PoE rather than necessarily the way that they wanted to play.
It was a symptom.
Yeah, like I think it's one of the things where PoE is really good at how PoE plays, but that's the style your team is going to play. Like you were getting kind of opted into that by signing him. We did, as Kobe said, get invited to come talk with those guys. And for what it's worth, fans listening, we'd be happy to come see some other team stuff and get some insight too. But anyway, CLG did give us a little bit of insight. And I have always been really a big fan of Crown, and also I think when I look at like his successes on Optic and how he was playing side lanes and looking for proactive plays, I think Ruin should work well with that. He's paired with another Korean solo laner who's going to have some good communication there. They have a Korean coach, which is also something that Crown really, really wanted. He wanted to be able to have a coach that he can communicate well with, work well with, and we got to talk to CLG's coach Song, and he had a lot of positive things to say, and also was kind of saying that, he thinks Crown can actually play everything, right? He was playing what he felt they needed on Optic, but he's confident that he can play, all kinds of aggressive picks and a more kind of up-tempo style. So from that, I took it as this is going to be a more proactive team than we saw last year. I know that Ruin can play that play style because Ruin is incredibly flexible too. He played I think it was the first 10 games of the season, he played a different champion every game when he came into the league. And he was constantly making TP plays and looking for those sorts of aggressive moves. And when you combine that with a Crown who is playing, TF or Kiana or things can move around the map too, I think that can become pretty exciting and maybe enable Stixxay to kind of be more of that carrying force. So I think we're going to see a different identity. And when I look at some of the kind of like one-to-one changes, I do think Bio on an individual level performed better, but he's a very quiet player, and when you're on a team of all very quiet players, I think having a strong voice in the team can make a difference, right? And I think Smoothie there should fill that role. I do like Crown more than PoE, and I think it gives them more options to play how they want to play. I think, Song coming in is great for their coaching staff. I think that's also a really big upgrade for CLG. So you're going to be
I think that's Song is a bit of an enigma to me.
Okay.
Because I haven't worked with him directly.
Okay.
When we saw him first show up on Immortals, we're like, this guy's the second coming of this, whoever's the smartest first coming. I guess Koma. I don't know. He was super smart. Everyone loved him on Immortals because that roster no one thought was going to be that great. And then they were really good. Then he goes to TSM, struggles, goes to Echo Fox. That organization was probably just a dumpster fire to begin with, so I don't want to put too much on him. But he certainly didn't save it. And there were some weird things going on with Rush and the jungle situation, and a lot of the subs were just like, what is happening on this team? And I think Irene, however you pronounce it, I hadn't heard anything bad about from anyone, and people are really high on him every time I hear people talk about him. Song, during his TSM days, and I talked to some people who were players and staff during the time, were not super impressed by his ability to actually organize and lead some of the stuff, as smart as he may be about the game. Maybe Weldon can help fix some of the deficiencies that he apparently has. But I don't look at it as an upgrade in the coaching staff. And I do put some of the success that came from that CLG team, from what I understand, from Irene, giving them a direction that did work well with PoE's play style.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, I really, at the end of the day, like there are a lot of unknowns here, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of assuming that they're going to play a different style. You know, you're assuming that they're going to try to play the same style, but
No,
not
I
as
think
well.
they need to play a new style.
Okay.
Is what I was saying. Because I don't think the other one transfers over at all, and I just don't know if they can find it with all the new pieces.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But I do think those three teams, their high end, can be competing, you know, at the top, and that's something that I'm excited to see how they're going to perform.
Those three teams, you meaning the three that we just mentioned under Team Liquid?
Yeah.
Yeah. The it's actually funny because I tweeted out for a lot of Twitter questions, and a lot of them surrounded these names, these brands that
Very
have stuck
popular
around.
brands.
Exactly. Still rising back to the top, even though, of course, last split TSM had their fall. And it is pretty interesting that they have been able to resurface just with these off-season moves. But honestly, do you want to make another group as far as the next few then? Because I have with a lot of
I thought EG was supposed to be in that group. No, only me.
Yeah, only you.
So
Only me?
I actually have Dig next. So we have some differences as far as where we're putting them.
Podcast listeners are gonna be like, "What?"
I
Shaking.
I talked to a lot of people. Maybe it's a little recency bias, but a lot of the preparation scrims and stuff, even without Huni, had been going very well. So yeah, I have more faith in them than you guys. But let's
Well,
group
what was
our-
next?
The aggregate is actually a tie between EG and Dig.
All right, let's just do Dig since
Because both Kobe and I had EG at 6, you had them at 4, and then we had 2 5s on Dig, and you had them at 6, so they both are 5.3333. So those two teams we actually have tied here essentially for 5th place.
All right, well, let's do Dig since Kobe was already kind of saying some of the
Sell us on
positives.
Dig, Kobe.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna make my excuse first. The thing I am
I don't care about your excuse.
worried about for this team is the jungle, is Grig, because again it is a Grig Acadian duo. They basically got the TSM package, which was not a good package last year. I'm just gonna be honest. It was a bad package.
Return to sender. You got the same thing back again.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that this might have been like late acquisitions or something. But we heard. Well, maybe I shouldn't say it since I don't know if that was public or not. But anyways, there's something different about the way the
package has changed.
Yeah, there's something different about the way that duo is operating. But if we just assume it is what we have on paper for this team, you actually mentioned it earlier, but to me, biggest failing for Grig is always his on-stage performances. And the team talked about this all the time in all the TSM footage that they put out too. Like he would do well in scrims, he would do well in solo queue, and yet on stage it would be a big flop. And you could see it in a lot of these points. And a lot of them also, working with different players on the team. So it wasn't just one pinpoint relationship. So I'm still cautious about can Grig actually perform on the LCS stage? And, can, I guess, the package that's from last year's TSM Jungle actually show improvement? Other than that, this is why I had them pretty high, because as much as people flaming Huni for getting the big paycheck,
I think that was a little ridiculous. Though.
Don't hate the player, hate the org.
Yeah, I mean it's a big paycheck. Congratulations. He to me did show improvement because there was a long period of time where he had really lost his top lane dominance.
Huni magic.
Exactly. The aura of Huni top lane, always going to be
holo.
pushing, always going to win lane. You ran into some problems there for a while. A little bit too much head first into the enemy team, dying excessively. But he improved tremendously at the end there, especially with Clutch. I think it's one of the reasons a lot of people were surprised to see the Clutch roster blown up, because they felt like those players had really come to rely on each other, play well with each other. I still think that he'll be a good, very strong individual piece, aside from some of the broken ties that are no longer there from the old Clutch side. And then I also thought that Froggen was a very good individual player, very good mid lane player. The cautionary tales are kind of similar to some other people that we have mentioned, where Froggen has been playing this game for so long. He has a very strong opinion of how he wants to play the game. And there are starting to, with him and Huni, those are both two very opinionated solo laners. So that might be an area for clash. But I feel very good about the solo laners. And then the bottom lane, rolling them dice on some NA talent with Johnson, solo queue dominator, with a veteran by his side in Afromu.
That's the most exciting thing for me about this roster is Johnson. Like, is this the premiere of another great North American AD carry? Great respective to North America. Because I call Cody Sun a great North American AD carry.
Yeah. And you got double lift?
I think I had Cody ahead of Sneaky.
Okay. Cody, Sneaky.
Yeah, Sven.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, Sven's not North America.
Oh, if you're saying only North America. Yeah. Then
6A in there, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, if Johnson can reach that level, that's great. And that would be a huge boon for this roster. For me, I look at this and I'm like, doesn't this sound a little bit like Golden Guardians from last year? Huni and Hanser, for a period of time, were the guys top of North America debating, is it Huni or Hanser who's better? And now they're both more in like the 3 or 4 spot, while Impact and Licorice are the 1 and 2. You have a question mark jungler, which was Contracts, now Grig. And you have a bot lane where you're kind of like, hopefully it works out, and maybe it can. Where you have a bit of an older support in a slump who's been trending downwards for Ole for Afromu, and a bit of a younger AD carry, and definitely with Johnson, right? And that team was okay. They were like 4th. And then they trended downwards.
They got 5th, but remember they were 1 game off making semifinals, and where our aggregate has them at 5th.
Right, and that's what I'm saying though is I have them at 6th. You guys are the ones who have them at 4th. So I'm saying I don't think that this.
Wait, we don't have them at 4.
Oh, I thought you got him at 5th. I'm at 6th. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we're only splitting hairs a little bit here.
We are.
But since Kobe presented the good side, I'm presenting the bad side, which is
get him.
I don't think this roster has huge upside at all. I mean, like I said, this to me looks like Golden Guardians 2.0 from last year, where I'm still like, what is your play style? Because Huni on Clutch, and one of the reasons they ended up good was not raw talent. It was they found a play style that worked for them, which was support Huni with everything you have. And also we are really good at
going crazy.
Yeah, they had really specific champions that worked well for them. Lyra had the highest jungle proximity in the league as he supported these laners. Also, bot lane, Vulcan was a pretty active player, more active than Afromu has been, and a better laner. Cody Sun was super good, And so, they worked around Huni really well to get him back up to that level that we're talking about he returned to. I don't know if Grig can perform Lyra's role. I don't think Froggen wants to play Damonte's role. I don't know if the bot lane can be as good as their bot lane from before, and that was our 3rd place team in the league, right? So I'm not saying they have to play the same way. I'm just saying that I don't see how Froggen and Huni ever agree on the way to play the game.
So I agree with you, and that's why I don't think they're a top 3 team, right? You know, we're comparing a Worlds team versus, I mean, we looked at TL, who's clear number 1, and then kind of our pack of 3, who's basically contenders. This next grouping of 3 that I would say is like EG, Dig, 100 Thieves are to me the ones that are like the playoff hopefuls, right? They're the ones who are trying to get in with that playoff spot. And I think that's more where you're pointing at for this Dignitas roster, because we're not talking about them winning a championship. I don't think that they're going to be a flawless team, but I do think that they have enough individual talent and there is some promise in their bot lane. I think that the solo laners have been good. I think, really in summer, Huni again did play really well. There was that stretch of really kind of from 2018 Rift Rivals to 2019 Spring where he wasn't good, but it felt like he's back on form. And Froggen has had some really strong individual performances. So even if it's not super cohesive, I feel like if the individual pieces are working well, that's enough to get you into playoffs.
And as far as style goes, I'll let you go again after, but to add some more positivity back in, I do know that currently in the pro meta, in scrims, Lucian and Rumble are very, very, very highly prized picks
China too, everywhere.
For dominating lane. And these are 2 of Huni's most famous champions. I feel comfortable throwing Rumble up as a flex pick for this team, just like I did with Clutch. I feel very comfortable with early picking Lucian as well for them. So I feel like even though a lot of pieces have changed, I think some of these strengths, especially for Huni, are really going to be there in the current meta that we're going to start the season out on. We'll see about how the meta changes, but I think he is set up at least for success early on.
I think it depends on where the other bans are going, because you can very quickly ban him out. If you're talking about, okay, Lucian and this, and Froggen's one of those players who has such a deep champion pool. I almost feel like bans are wasted on him. It's also really unique where, like, unless there's one specific thing in the meta that he's really dominating on, there's no point in banning his Anivia and his Orianna and all these other like he has such a deep champion pool. I think you can kind of target him, and then it's on the rest of the other players to figure something out.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I think I look at this team as, like I said, a little bit different of a Golden Guardians than we saw before, and that was a team that finished fifth, sixth
in spring, but then 10th in summer.
No, it was a seventh.
Seventh.
Yeah.
Summer.
So like they're between that 5th and 7th mark for me, and that's why I put them 6th. And I don't think they'll be terrible. I think they have too many individually strong players to outright get rolled in any capacity. But they also lost their some of their coaching staff, like Artemis was gone. I think they brought someone else in, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So we'll have to see. But I just don't think this roster will gel.
All right, so let's jump into the next one then. That's EG. We also have them tied at an aggregate of 5th. You actually have them highest mark. You had them at
crazy.
4. We had them at 6. I think this is the team, when I've talked to the most, like a lot of different people, with the most variance in the power rankings, because you have all these pieces that, if they work, maybe it's going to be really, really good, right? You have the former MVP. You have it paired up with Jizuke, who's coming off of a pretty down year, but due to a lot of health issues, and apparently he's really healthy and playing well again. And if you're looking at like rookie of the split Jizuke with MVP Sven Skaren and, Bang working well with Zazel, then all of a sudden it starts to get really exciting, right? And I can kind of see both sides of the coin. Do you kind of want to make your argument for why you have them in top 4? Because you have them pretty high.
Sure. So I'll do the positive spin. And I definitely agree with everything you said about this is one of those teams where you have to hit like a running, what is it called? A parlay in gambling, where you bet on a couple things happening. And I am going for the parlay a little bit. I'm at 4th. I think what always happens is, like, if you go only based off what you think averages, eventually you're going to get some wrong. So this is one of the teams I'm betting, quote unquote, big on with some of these things landing. Like you've already said, Sven Skaren, MVP. We've already gushed about him a little bit. Everyone knows how good he is. We heard, players being like, oh God, I want to play with that guy. And he is a very aggressive player too. He is bloodthirsty when he's on a team and they're bad. He looks horrible because he's still picking the same fights he would have picked if he had great teammates. And that's what we saw when he was on TSM and they were struggling at 2017, and I'm not expecting to see that, Sven. I think this team will work well together. Jizuke, like you said, hopefully going back a little bit more to the World's form. And when you think about that team in 2018, they were really crazy and really aggressive. And I think that should hopefully pair well with the Sven Skaren, who's down to scrap it out as well. Bot lane can play a little bit safer, I think, with Bang and Zazel not lane dominant. So you're going to hopefully see Zazel roaming and being a big factor in team fights, which he was with Sven in the past. So you're hoping some of that C9 synergy gets there. Kumo, for me, is actually the biggest question mark. He has been good in Academy, but not dominant for top laners. And so he is not Licorice 2.0 in most people's minds. But he has been okay when he did sub in for C9 when they played around him. But I don't know if you need to play around him quite that much. So I'm hoping this turns into a more top side centric team, very aggressive in the early game, and then some good leadership in the mid to late game, because they have actually a fair amount of veterans on the team other than Kumo. That's the upside. Plus the coaching staff should be good if you believe in everything we've heard about. Irian and Artemis are the 2 guys that they snatched up from other teams.
Yeah. I think for a lot of, especially the early games for this team, I'm going to be looking at the jungle mid synergy to see if this is really going to spark that for me, because that's going to be the exciting thing. Bang and Zazel as a duo.
I tried to just be like, and then their laning phase might not be great, and they'll be good in team. But I tried to just skip right over
really
that.
concerned.
I'm just like, oh man, because Bang had on 100 Thieves, like he had such a. You could tell that he was really affected by all the negative feedback, right? And by all accounts, for all the players that are playing against Zazel as well, not the strongest laner as far as the support. So if you start off and you have poor laning phases, and that attracts more flame, that attracts more criticism, is that bottom lane going to be able to stay afloat? Because I started to see Bang play better individually. Bang started playing better and better. He's been over here adjusting more and more to North America. But I really, in the offseason, was hoping that he would get one of these aggressive supports to really, bolster his confidence. get him into that mood to start playing more along those lines, and we'd see like a full resurgence. So I'm cautious about this one.
Yeah, that's my big concern too. You know, I think a lot of people were like, well, Bang struggled in lane because Afro's not the greatest laning support. Well, guess what? Now you're with Zeyzal, who's probably, you know, that level or worse in laning. That's really not his strength. I was also very excited for him to maybe end up with like a Biofrost or a Vulcan or something like that. Then I could really maybe see him shine. I think their success is going to hinge on them being able to be a stable bot lane that carries team fights later on mid jungle being a really powerful duo. Because if those two things don't happen, I think the wheels fall off. Kumo, I think was solid in the academy by all accounts. I was really not impressed in LCS, even though overall people kind of look at it and were like, he did really well. He solo killed Impact. He played Jace 3 out of 4 games, averaged like 12 to 15 CS down in lane while getting camped for and picked for with like a really lane dominant pick, right?
Yep.
So that is super concerning to me if you really cater to someone and they don't succeed. To be fair, he's super young. That was his like first LCS games. And if he can play at a higher level, then things maybe look really different. But based on what I saw from him in LCS in those couple games, I was really concerned what a full split looks like for him. Because if you are one of those players who's really reliant on one or two picks, we kind of saw this from FBI when he first came into the league. FBI came into the league, everyone was really hot on him. Oh my God, he's popping off on Varus every game. Varus started getting banned, and it didn't feel like he could do anything. And I hope that Kumo is going to be able to have a stronger laning phase. You know, like the glass half full kind of look is, well, if you look at LPL, actually every single game top lane is just like Aatrox, Mord, which aren't like, you know, it's like pretty stable laners and some renekton because Lucian and Rumble are just getting chain banned and Rumble is actually getting played mid mostly. So if it's just kind of like, ooh, if you can just like throw some Mord in there and play kind of defensive and your mid jungle's popping off and your bot's stable, then that's how EG succeeds. And I think that they do have a really high ceiling if all these pieces fall into place. But it's like you say, right? You're betting on a number of different things happening because there's so many variables here. It's not like you're just saying, ooh, if Dardoch's good, TSM's going to win, right?
Yeah.
You're saying if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, then they're going to win.
All right.
100
Who's
Thieves.
next?
100 Thieves. We all agreed they're 7th. So we had 2 tied for 5th, and now we are dropping down a little bit.
I thought also coming into this blind that I was going to have them lower than everyone else at 7.
I still feel like I have them low because I'm not. I would have thought that I would have had them in playoffs.
That's what I was thinking. I was really debating like Dig and them swapping around.
Yeah, I wasn't because.
All right,
so,
Negative Nancy, you go first.
Yeah. So,
Negative Nancy had them at 7, unlike me and Mark, who also had them at 7.
yeah, but you
we
wanted to wiggle them up. I was considering.
I was like a really high 7.
Yeah, there's like a. I guess
It's your
7 plus.
It's your lucky
Yeah.
number.
Yeah.
So really, it's a bonus position. Honestly, though, from what it sounds like for the start of the team, basically from top to bottom of the map, looks great and goes the worst. As far as the performance,
Really think the bottom looks the
performances
worst?
so far, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Because again, I'm biased from
Rams.
talking to players.
Okay.
So I talk to people in Europe because they went to go boot camp with Origin as well as in NA. And the bottom lane hasn't, for whatever reason, has not been performing well. And I go into it expecting people to be like, oh yeah, the mid laner. But yeah, bottom lane has sounds like the biggest issue. And for me, when I hear that, I'm like, oh man, well, that really does kind of change my whole idea about how this team plays the game then. Because 100 Thieves with Someday and before, they even had a lot of games where Someday did well in lane. Jungler did well, whether it was amazing or even in the previous days. And they were a bottom team and struggling, to get up there, right? So this for me, once I started hearing that feedback, I was like, okay, so either something really has to come together with coaching staff and training and more of this offseason, or it's going to be rough for them again, and they're going to have to rebuild up.
So to support that point a little bit, as much as everyone knows how good Someday is individually, he has never succeeded at being the number one option on a North American team. Even going back to the Dignitas days when they were at their best, it was actually when Alltech was being kind of the primary carry and doing a lot of the work, and he was more on tanky duty to help out. And he's a great weak side player, and he can be a fantastic number 2, I think. But to your point, that means that you need a number 1 being kind of more of the focus, and no one's expecting it to be Ryoma. They're all thinking it's going to be Cody-san, and we know Cody-san can be great. But Stunt is someone who has not been able to stay on a team as a starter. And one of the things I always hear from people who play with him is they don't really like his thoughts on the game. They don't like playing with him. He is like pretty vocal about what he thinks is like the right call or the right move, and people disagree. And Cody-san, who knows what happened at 100 Thieves? But I hear that he has
also pretty vocal
about what he wants done, and so I could see a world where that bot lane doesn't work at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also like,
I do know. I'm pretty sure they are friends in real life, so they should have at least good friendship, good chemistry themselves. So I don't. Yeah, for me, it probably won't be them arguing with each other, but.
Yeah, maybe they just see it differently too. You know, it could be, oh yeah, we like each other, but he wants to go in and I don't, and blah, blah, blah. I would think that though this roster should be good because I can see it recapturing some of the magic of the original one where someday, Meteos and Afro did a really good job feeding Cody-san. Hopefully Stunt, as a good playmaker, can work with Meteos to get kills, and Ryoma will be a team player and someday can be kind of on an island, but a great player on an island. But if that formula falls apart, I don't think going back to someday and playing around him works. Unless, like you said, this coaching staff can fix that problem that's been present for 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see this group of players and this team as potential for like anywhere in the 5, 6, 7. I see them as very similar to the Dig and EG, and I did have them at the bottom, but I really do think that them playing well means they're going to be in playoffs. Like I think this is certainly a pretty strong potential roster. I'm more nervous and more feeling like 7 is more justified when I do hear this Cody-san Stunt stuff not performing as well in scrims, because I actually hadn't heard that, and I was kind of cautiously optimistic about Stunt. One thing I will say kind of in his favor is that I had heard that he had been really trying to work on his communication skills and doing like improv classes and doing all these things, like, and he wasn't even told to do this. It's just he wanted to work on it, improve, and he really seems, when I have talked to him, to have a big drive to succeed. I think when he played for Phoenix 1, he looked good on stage, but then they went to Shady, who I never thought really looked that good. And that kind of does speak to, more like interpersonal issues or social issues or whatever the problem is there. Stunt's also a beast in solo queue. You talk about Johnson. Stunt will have like 4 accounts in the top 20 in Challenger as a solo. Like he's solo queuing as support, and he's always at the top with a bunch of accounts. So he's a solo queue beast. Cody-san has been performing really well. So if they could gel, this should be a strong playoff team. My main concern and reason for kind of putting them down was I have very little faith in Ryoma. No one I talked to had been able to sell me on it. I was even trying to get Papa Smithy to sell me on it. He wouldn't tell me anything. Like, no one will sell me on this guy. Talking to even some of the OCE guys, they're not sure he can compete. And I just think that mid lane is too damn important in League of Legends. I think it's the most important role, has been the most important role forever. If your mid laner is going to get trashed, as people are leading me to believe he will, by the top mid laners, I don't see how you could break in to the top 4, right? And that's kind of why I have them in this pack. If Ryoma can really develop, one thing Papa Smithy did say is he thinks that Ryoma has a really high ceiling, right? That they think he can get there. And if he does get there, then this team could be really damn good. But my concern really does kind of lie around the mid lane, because I just think it's even more important now, where they took more experience out of the jungle, they took more experience out of bot lane, they gave more experience to solo laners. Guess what? Mid lane is in a more central position. It's integral to getting both the Rift and the Dragon. It's integral to getting jungle advantages where the other jungler can't come back. Everything goes through this. And if you can't play to your mid lane, I just don't think you can win enough games in the LCS.
I agree. I mean, you saw it with Saligo last year. The only other thing I was going to ask about was you guys' opinion on Zix, because I think he's someone who I've always respected a lot and have a pretty good personal relationship with. But he's coming off not much success towards the tail end of his CLG career, and getting let go because of differences with management and things like that about what they were doing. Then went to TSM. Started out pretty good in spring, I think, all things considered, but then when they started falling apart in summer, some of the messaging around the team made it sound like he wasn't super involved anymore. When Parth had a big post about what went wrong, he didn't even mention Tony in it, and that's your head coach, but he mentioned like other people, and it made it seem like either they lost faith in him or he wasn't doing a good job. I never really got clarification, but either way, he wasn't with the team again next year. And so I was wondering, is your guys' perception of him getting soured at all? And do you think, like, if 100 Thieves goes bottoms up and some of these problems emerge, does he start taking flack for it? And like, how much goodwill does Tony really still have with the league community?
I think he has a lot.
With me, I was gonna say with me, he still has a lot. But again, coaches are so hard for us.
Yeah.
Because teams don't ever want to share any special scrim info or any strategies and stuff like that, or how they're actually going about coaching. So it's really always hard to get those little pieces out. And a lot of our coaching evaluations is guesswork or interpersonal stuff.
The only thing I can say, I mean, he is one of the guys I know better, so like I am somewhat biased by that.
That's how I feel, because I think he's a really.
I
good
think
coach.
he's smart, but also to support this, I've never heard one of his players say something bad about him. And maybe that's just I'm not talking to the right people, or they didn't offer that up. I'm not saying no one has ever said anything bad about him, but I have not experienced that. And I have, on a number of different occasions, unprompted, had people say, oh yeah, Tony's one of the best coaches I ever had, right? I've had Parth himself say that Tony is one of the best coaches in the league for a long time before they even got him, right? Like, he was always an advocate that Tony should be getting coach of the split. Afro, who's been around the league forever, told me Tony's one of the best coaches he ever had, and like one of the only guys he thought really understood the game. And so I hear a lot of positive stuff about him. I do think public perception will start to sour, right? But the TSM thing, I don't really count against him that much, because it also feels like that just happens a lot with TSM. As soon as the roster stops doing well at all, TSM kind of steps in, and whether it's been Reggie, or maybe now it's Parth stepping in, or whoever they're having, or Peter moving up, right? Like, it always feels like they're like, okay, very quickly, plan B, someone else move in, get this guy out of there. And that's kind of how TSM does things. Yeah,
I agree that it does seem pretty bad environment. I mean, even those Skype logs leaked from Tony talking about not wanting to work at TSM, or it was a Discord message where he's talking to Afro.
Before he got hired, though?
Yeah, it was before he got hired, but he was like, working there sounds like a nightmare. And they said something like it's a paycheck or something.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's really, and that's very funny.
Yeah. All that's super
I'm sure
fun.
he wanted it to keep it that way.
Yeah.
I forgot about it.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry, guys. I'm just saying that, like, I'm wondering how much I'm colored by my personal friendship with him. And also the fact that things do change. Like, maybe he was a fantastic coach 5 through 7, but then maybe things change and like players drop off, coaches drop off. They get stuck in mindsets that don't apply anymore. Things like that happen.
All right. I'm being told we need to zoom along.
We need to zoom. We got
we gotta have time for this or that.
Yeah, I was good.
Oh, well, who don't watch that show?
I was gonna say, like, I had 100 Thieves, and they kept dropping the more like little pieces of info that I got. Because individual, I was like, Cody Sun and Stunt. I thought that was that was really gonna work. So maybe I think that it still can, but let's move on.
I'll let you take the lead on these next ones, Kobe. We got FlyQuest, Immortals, and then Golden Guardians rounding out the bottom.
All right, we can do those pretty quick as a group then. Who did anyone have them higher? Okay, these ones we all had the bottom 3, but they're different orders for everybody.
Well, Golden Guardians was all 10th, right?
Yeah.
Golden Guardians.
FlyQuest and Immortals are the ones that are switched.
Yeah.
So I had FlyQuest a little bit higher, because I have heard a lot of positive stuff about them bringing on Ignar. They feel like that was a really big improvement for the team as a whole, and specifically for the bottom lane. For me, that's one of the biggest parts. This team has had Wild Turtle forever, basically, and yet they have never really been able to bring out like old Wild Turtle, I guess. And he has felt like, I know, like, he has to do a lot for this team. I know he works really hard. He's always trying to think how to make the team better as a whole. But for him to have an upgrade in support, and then I also think Power of Evil coming in is good for the way they want to play the game. If all they need is Santorin and Viper to have more of like a spring performance than a summer performance from last year. And I think this team is higher than I even put them. Like, this team has a much higher cap than I actually have them down here at 8 or whatever we have it.
Yeah. I almost feel like they should be, and the more I think about it, they should almost be grouped up with like the playoff hopefuls, right? More like with the 100 Thieves, because I feel like people are much more doom and gloom about Immortals and Golden Guardians. Maybe I'm wrong about that, or putting words in your mouth, but
that's why I put them higher.
Yeah, I mean, I have them 8th as well.
You have them 8 all the time.
But but I do think there's potential there, right? The reasons I think people don't put them there, is that Ignar maybe not coming off the absolute strongest seasons. PoE has somewhat of a kind of game warping play style. Viper and Santorin both looked quite bad in summer. Santorin I thought was fantastic in spring. Viper looked stronger in spring. In summer, it felt like they could only ever win if he played Riven, and Santorin just didn't seem to put together strong games.
And that's my big concern, was that was a team that when we looked at the jungle proximity, Santorin still had reasonable jungle proximity, but he felt so inactive when you watch the games.
Yeah.
You're pairing that with an inactive mid laner,
and he was playing like Elise and stuff.
Yeah, he would power farm and not gank on Elise, or you wouldn't see him use Karthus ult the first 25 minutes of the game or something insane. And that's a whole team problem, obviously, with the Karthus ultimate. But it spoke to like this team that couldn't find plays, and PoE is a guy who doesn't want to make plays in the early game. And I believe in Viper's individual skill. I just don't know if this is a roster that's going to work for that. And then the bot lane, like you're saying, hopefully Ignar comes in and turns things around and helps Turtle out, because JJ has had his moments, but it's like on Braum and Alistar specifically, and Wadid never super panned out.
Okay.
So I'm just really pessimistic.
Why did you put Immortals above them? Immortals are next.
When I start ranking players individually, Smithy and Hakuho are top 4 easily in their roles. There's no one like that on FlyQuest. I would not put anyone in top 4. Even though it is in arguably less important positions, in air quotes, of support and jungle, and maybe I have Ica lower than most people on, in general, I still think Soaz is a really smart team player. I think Smithy's a really smart team player, and I think Hakuho is really good. Alltech and Ica are giant question marks, which is why I still have them out of playoffs. And I don't think this team has a primary playmaker carry kind of thing, but they have really, really strong, I don't want to use the term role players, but support in jungle. They can't be primary carries in those positions, but those are some of the best players that we had in our league last year. People talking about Hakuho being them, top 5, top 6, maybe. I think Smithy is like top 2, maybe going to go down to top 3, top 4. Those are good players, and I don't think a team like that I see here is going to be outright awful. So that's why I don't have them at 9th, which I think is a team that blew up and it's not working at all. 9th and 10th kind of feel like those kinds of teams.
My main concern for Immortals is when I look at individual pieces, I've been like, this is pretty nice. But when I try to think about how they're working together, because I see Xmithy as the force multiplier, not as the guy who's just going to 1v9 take over the game and win you a bunch of games, right? And when paired with really good laners and really good potential carry players, he can get more out of them than probably any other jungler in the league. Right. And I think we saw that for many years with all these championships that he's won. He's won as many titles as Bjergsen now. Right. It's not by accident.
Yeah.
But Ike is a huge question mark to me. He has been kind of bouncing around the EU amateur scene for a really long time. If he's not great, I think this team is terrible, because I just don't see them having a carry. You can't play the game with all like role players or supports or whatever you want to call them. Soaz, I think, is a strong team player, like weak side player, whatever you want to say. It's been a long time since I've felt like he's like the dominant carry force. Ike, I don't really see that coming from him. Alltech hasn't even been in the league for like a year and a half.
And even then, he was a cleanup carry.
Exactly. He was more the late game guy who would kind of scale up, and maybe like almost like Apollo-esque. I always kind of saw him as like he was fairly reliable, but I just don't see who you're playing around. And I think that's such a problem. Like if Ica is way better than we're expecting, if he's popping off, then great. Xmithy has somewhere to go, but I just don't see where he's supposed to go and who's supposed to be the person that you're putting all your resources in for this team. And that's the biggest problem for me for Immortal.
I would say they got to go bottom lane.
Yeah. I think they have to. Hakuho can be a playmaker. We've seen him dominate some games sometimes, and I think you're hoping Ica is good about roaming and getting to the bot lane and stuff like that. But I'm with you. I mean, I still have them 8th versus 9th. I think for me, this is a team that has a really low ceiling, but also doesn't have a floor that's much further behind, because I just can't see them being outright terrible as a unit. Whereas I can see FlyQuest never really working out. But I do see a world where FlyQuest does actually make playoffs if a number of those things that we were talking about in the previous one work out.
Good news is bottom lane is a good place to go right now in the meta. Dragon Souls reside there. So they have an out. Last team, Golden Guardians. Everybody has been memeing on them since they've got key switching to support. Golden Glue is back in.
You know, like the parlay thing I was saying before about hitting a running string of bets for something to turn out well? That's like what you're hoping for with this team without even like a top end. You're like, if everything works out,
I will say that they are so happy though.
Holy shit.
Oh my. So again, when I talk to these players though, they're popping off. They're like, I love Closer. He's a great jungler. Him coming over, like goes and he's crazy. He's fighting people all the time. We win the fights. I'm like, that sounds great. I'm on. Yeah, yeah. And Keith's like, you know what? Switching to support is sick. I like this. Yeah, we're doing fine. He's not quite as amped as the Closer talk. But he's like, yeah, it's going pretty well. We're winning. And so maybe that's a harder sell because I don't know. FBI to me, I really love the memes that come along with it, and everybody is going.
Open up.
Apparently, Impact says that every day. Yeah. Every scrim that they scrim,
Just 100 times.
just all day, every day. And anyways, I mean, this is like to me the most jovial team that I have to put at 10th because of just kind of the ridiculousness of all the this offseason for them. I did say at the beginning that I think the bottom of the LCS came up. So 10th now is better than 10th.
Oh, yeah, it's not Echo Fox.
No, exactly.
Echo Fox.
It's not even Golden Guardians from 2 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think that they're awful as much as we were just joking about it. I think the running string of parlays thing is true where Keith has to work out.
Yeah.
FBI has to show a little bit more than he's shown so far. I think he looked good on Lucian, right? And that was pretty much it. Maybe it was Lucian and Varus he looked okay on.
I think it was just Varus mostly.
Maybe it was just Varus, and then he started trying to play Lucian and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But those are the two champions. I remember him. Golden Glue has looked really good at times, but we have not actually seen him be the starter and perform. And then Closer has to work out as an import. Haunter, I think, is pretty steady. And
yeah.
I'm pretty confident about that. I can see a world where this team's top half of the map is actually pretty good, and the bot lane isn't a liability.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say as far as like all the things that have to go right. So I think everything has to go right if you want to actually be like a playoff team or a top-ish team. I don't actually think that much has to, like that many different things have to go right for them to be, not bottom, right? Like I think, Closer was TCL MVP. If he can actually be a successful, a really good jungler, if he can be one of the better junglers in the league, just that alone, I think makes a lot happen for them because Haunter is actually a guy who I think can, act as your primary carry. I think we saw even that last year from him when in some of his Vladimir games and whatnot, where he's actually really focusing on getting himself ahead, and it kind of paid dividends for the team. If Closer, Golden Glue, and Haunter can work well together, if the bot side of the map doesn't completely explode, then you're going to win some games, right? And I think that for me, I'm really excited about Closer. That's the guy I'm kind of looking at because I want to see, he's the biggest unknown for me. What can he get done? Because if he can get some stuff done, if he can really put in some work for this team, then they're going to pick up some wins. And at the very least, they're going to be interesting.
Oh, it's going to be interesting. I'm looking at if the bottom lane actually performs well. We go back to that video that we're memeing on where they're like, we need someone to play aggressive in the bottom lane. All these supports they have in they are trash. Keith, you have hands. Get in there. And then we clip that with a bunch of Keith
they will have
engaging.
The best meme
them
video.
Getting 2v2 kills all over the place. This bottom lane actually takes that to heart. And they're just like, you know what? We are going ham. This is gonna be a really exciting team, right? Yeah. Closer. People are already talking about him. He goes really ham. If that pairs well with Golden Glue and then they have just this aggressive bottom half of the map, I think that would be really fun. And that would be a great story if they do well also.
That'll be such a great
Everyone
video.
has them
Clips
at
from
10.
this, Reddit comments, just slamming them. I was watching Closer's stream last night, actually. It was pretty good. Just playing Lee Sin, working with Golden Glue. They look good.
All right, we got a mark. Pretty good. All right.
Yeah, pretty good.
That's a good award. Let's do one Twitter question then, even though we're over time here, because this is probably our most popular Twitter question ever.
Got a bunch of likes.
It got 40 likes, which rarely people responding to the original thread asking
Especially if
for
it's not someone who has a lot of followers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But big shout out to Edge SKL. Dylan is his name. And his question is Sven more likely to follow in Sven Skaren's shoes from TSM to Cloud9 and find success, or is Kabe more likely to follow in Sven's shoes? This is hard if you don't have the actual spelling of the name, so I'm trying to really enunciate.
Sven.
which is a great European AD carry, goes to TSM and proceeds to not find team success.
Okay, so my answer is completely dependent on the definition. If we are defining the success as the same level of success that Sven Skaren had on C9, I think that's so unlikely to, like, if we're saying Sven has to go to C9 and now win an MVP and make world semis, I think that's more unlikely because Sven Skaren reached such highs on Cloud9. So if we're defining it as that, I think Kabe is more likely to fail on TSM than Sven is to get an MVP and a world semis.
But I will say, I feel like that's a little too literal of like following the footsteps, you know, and I think we're on the same page. We're like, it's much better to just say he bounces back and goes back to being one of the best.
Pretty well.
He's got the summary here in brackets, which is from TSM to Cloud9 and find success. So he wants to make he wants to make it a bit softer, but improved from what we previously saw.
I already
from
thought
him
Sven was good though, on TSM. I know he got a lot of hate, but like I actually think he performed pretty well. Like for the most part, I think people attack him a lot, but I didn't think he was like necessarily the biggest issue for TSM. Oftentimes their laning was fine. He was in a pretty strong position, but
he has attackable moments.
He does.
That really stick out.
I mean, the Ezreal one was such a big one that everyone's going to attach to. But for the most part, I generally feel like if your team is not doing well and you're an AD carry, you don't do a lot in team fights. Like it's more, I don't know. I mean, he definitely had bad moments, but I already thought he was good.
The one thing I'll throw in is Doublelift definitely changed his tune on him. Like when he first came over, he was like, man, I can't exploit Sven. You know, if you remember his quotes, like right when they came over.
Still said he was a top 3 AD.
He did, but
recently.
I mean, Doublelift also changed his opinion, like the win, you know, so like who knows. But he came on Hotline Lee after Worlds and talked about how Sven doesn't punish any mistakes that he makes, he feels like, and that, you know, he doesn't actually make his own leads. He doesn't push his advantages if he has the opportunity to them. And he is hard to exploit at the same time. But then if you're not making leads, you give them up potentially in some of these attackable moments that we're talking about, usually outside of laning phase, then there's a lot of improvements that you can hopefully start seeing if he goes to C9 and things work out better. I do think TSM Sven was not Niels or even Sven from Europe. I think it's fair to say that.
Yeah. That's definitely fair. I think he's gonna have success. I think he's gonna look pretty good on C9 and people are gonna be happy about it. I think that's more likely than Kabe failing because I think Kabe is going to do well with TSM. I actually think both those rosters are going to do pretty well. So I'm going to go more likely that Sven has success on C9.
Just flipping and going to the positive one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for Kabe,
we're not defining it as he needs to get MVP in semifinals, in which case I just don't think that'll happen.
It depends also what people's perception of Kabe is. Like, do they think that he's like hands down the best marksman in Europe or something? Because there actually are a fair amount of good marksman players in Europe now. And I don't think he was the best. So I think as long as people's expectations are realistic.
I think Perks was even the best, and he was a very newly converted European bottom laner.
Yeah, but I mean, between like those two, Attila, Upset, you know, like there's actually a fair amount of good for a fair period. For a period of time, it's like they only have mid laners. Their marksmen suck. It's only Reckless, and I don't think people think that anymore.
No,
it's like Reckless and Forgiven, right? I think now
it's back.
Yeah, he's back too. So I think as long as you're expecting just a very good, and you're not expecting like he's going to come in and be the best in North America, then I agree. You know, it's more likely that Sven finds more success.
All right, that is going to do it for episode
100 minutes
of season 4.
I hope you have a long commute, guys.
Woo! All right, starting off with an extremely long one. Let's get to this or that as soon as we can.
Goodbye.
Tune into the LCS, by the way, starting on January 25th.